Welcome to Human Monsters. Part 1. Sisters survive deadly Christmas time attack at Utah cabin. Source CBS News. When the Teed family headed off to spend a snowy Christmas at their remote family cabin, they had no idea what the trip would bring. Two sisters who survive a harrowing home invasion share the terrifying story in their first extended television interview. Lene Teed. My family owns a beautiful cabin in Oakley, Utah. The sound of the river, the horses that are down in the pasture, the birds, it's absolutely heaven on earth to me. My mom had given it a name, Teed's Tranquility, because of the serenity and peace. Trish Teedy. The cabin was an awesome place to go to. As a young child, I loved going up there, bringing aunts and uncles and cousins. The cabin was about 2.5 miles off the road, and you have to snowmobile to during the winter time. It was an escape from the world for our family. Trish Teedy. It was the winter of 1990. Lene Teedy. I was 20 years old and my little sister was 16. Trish Teedy. It was Christmas time. We're off for the holidays. There's a large Christmas tree with lots of gifts around it. Lene Teedy. My mom even had our Christmas stockings hung under the fireplace mantle, ready for Santa to come. Teedy tranquility shattered. Those days before Christmas, our family had to finish up our Christmas shopping and head back to the family cabin. My mom and Grams and I arrived at the cabin first, and my hands were freezing. It was a bitter cold winter that year. I asked my mom to hurry and unlock the door. I needed to run in and run my hands under some water, and I would be right back down to help her. I got to the top of the stairs, and I saw a gray flash go behind the refrigerator. And the first thought that popped into my mind was, oh, a cousin's here already, and was going to jump out and say, boo. It didn't turn out that way. Behind the refrigerator came a frizzy-headed man in a gray sweatshirt with his pistol pointed at me. I assumed that he would just want to rob us and be on his way. As soon as my mom came to the top of the stairs, out from the back bedroom, another robber with really thick Coke bottle glasses was pointing a gun at my mother. My mom was saying to him, what is it you want? Why are you here? I'll give you anything. Seconds after she had said that, gunfire started imploding, exploding, explosion from everywhere. I saw my mom go down. I turned at that point and looked over my shoulder to my Grams and saw her get shot in the head and blood spray everywhere. I heard her gasp for some breath, and then it was just dead silence. I felt pretty certain that they were dead. My thoughts were turned to knowing that within minutes my dad and sister would be coming. I can remember hearing snowmobiles coming in the distance, and my heart sinking to my gut, knowing that was my dad and sister. Linnea and Teedy. It felt like slow motion and quick all at once. I can remember the screams and Grams falling off the stool and my mom reaching over her chest. I've been shot. Another shooting and the cabin set ablaze. I started to think, plan ahead. I knew that there was a car, and I knew my dad left the car keys underneath the mat. I knew that if we got these men out of the cabin and into the car, that my dad and my sister would be safe. As the noise of the snowmobiles became closer, the man in the gray sweatshirt grabbed me from behind, around the neck, put his gun to my back. Trish Titi. Dad and I arrived at the cabin. As soon as we got off the snowmobiles, a man jumped out from the garage with a full ski mask on and a gun and demanded that we come inside right away. Don't move, don't move, don't move, don't do anything. Leanne Teedy. My dad could see tears in my eyes, and it was an unspoken communication. And he knew at that point that something awful had happened to Mom and Grams. The man asked my dad if he had any money. He reached into his pockets and pulled out what he had and threw it down on the ground. The man in the Coke bottle glasses was instructed by the other to shoot my dad. He pulled back the hammer. I heard it, and he refused to fire. Trish Teedy. So then the other man, restraining my sister, pulled his gun out, pointed it at my dad, pulled the trigger. Once, click, no fire. Twice, click, no fire. And then a third one. That blast was, it was close. I could feel it. Lene Teedy. I had no doubt in my mind that he was dead, just like Mom and Grams. I was terrified to think that the trauma would not stop. It kept going. It didn't make any sense to me. I had no idea what was happening or why. These men that were in the cabin, I knew that they had been there for a while. There was food eaten, there was Christmas presents open. It wasn't just that we walked in and startled them or scared them. They had actually waited for our family to return home. Their plan was to destroy their evidence, burn it to the ground. There was always gas cans available, full of gas, for the snowmobiles. Trisha Teedy. They immediately got busy doing things. Lene Teedy. They poured gas everywhere and set the cabin on fire. I can remember hearing the smoke alarms going off as the fire was already blazing in the cabin. Trish Teedy. There was a sense of urgency to get out of there. They began telling us as we got to hurry and load the snowmobiles and get out of there. I had this feeling inside of me that we needed to listen and do what they said until the moment came to where Lene and I could make our escape. Lene Teedy. My sister and I drove these awful men on the snowmobiles out of the cabin. I drove one man behind me, and my sister drove the other man behind her. Trish, I had all kinds of different plans of how to wreck the snowmobile, how to throw him off into a tree, how to get rid of him, but all I could think of is I couldn't leave my sister. Lene, I can remember wanting to stay close enough that I could still see my sister, that I felt a sense of security, knowing that she was still there. Trish, there was no one to help us. There was nowhere to go. We were in the middle of the mountains on snowmobiles. Lene, we headed up to the main gate and saw my uncle Randy Zorn. I seen the snowmobiles come up the trail, 2 snowmobiles, and I go, look, there are my nieces. I knew it was the girls with 2 people on the back. And I go, wow, they got boyfriends. I walked over there and tried to greet them and say hi. And I waved my hands in there and they just drove by me And I go, that's weird. That's not my nieces. They don't do that to me. Trish, I saw my uncle. My uncle had pulled up and he waved at us. We just kind of looked at him and turned back. And the men said, "Who was that?" Well, somebody that must live up there being nice. I knew his life could be in danger. I knew if these men knew Randy was our uncle there, that they would have killed him. Rescued. Trish, we were up there in the mountains. There was no one around. It was just my sister and I and two men that were dangerous and had a gun. There was a feeling of being completely vulnerable. When we reached the family car, they had two guns. Each of them had a gun. The dark-headed man loaded his gun in the trunk. And as he loaded his gun in the trunk, he pulled his jacket open and he had a knife. And he looked at me and goes, "Don't worry, I'm just as good with a knife as I am a gun." Randy. And then I seen the Lincoln come out across the street, and I go, well, there they go again. I was walking up to the car as they were pulling out, and they seen I was actually looking in the back, and I think I seen Leanne in the back. And I wave my hands again. I go, "Stop, Leanne." I knew that if we were to call out or us plead for help or act like we knew Randy, that Randy would be shot as well. So he was waving his arms, and my sister and I just pretended we didn't know who he was. Randy. The car just drove right by me. I knew something's wrong. I don't think it was a minute. I see another snowmobile come up with this person on it, and I look and I look and I go, he has no coat on. No gloves, no helmet. I go, who is this? I go, oh my God, it's my brother, Rolf. And his face is just huge and full of blood and just big. Eye swollen shut, blood lines, because it was cold. He was in really bad shape. And he says, "I've been shot. My wife has been killed, and my daughters have been kidnapped." I start heading down the canyon as fast as I could. I'm in panic. Rolf's in the back, full of blood, laying on the back seat. 20 years ago, your cell service did not work up there whatsoever in that canyon. And I kept trying and trying and trying. There are two things on my mind: save the girls, get him on a life flight. I come up to the back of the Lincoln. I know the girls are kidnapped. I know the guys have got guns in the car there. I'm going, what do I do? Do I run him off the road? And my mobile kicked in. I got 911 on my mobile. She says, "Tell me what direction they're going." We got police. We got people in the area. I go, well, they're turning on the road. They're towards Camus. I go, I need a helicopter. And the phone went dead. Phone went dead. I pulled into the gas station, went over to the payphone, and got 911 back on the phone again. And I go, guns, I need a helicopter now. Trish. We notice a cop car pass us and turn around and begin to follow us. Both men began to panic. I remember looking. The speedometer's going over 90 miles an hour. We turned right down towards the canyon and went another mile or so and then fell. The car fell off an embankment. I remember looking up because the car was at an angle and noticing in the entire road above us, we came down was full of maybe a couple of cops, but mostly people in common clothes, drawn down with pistols and shotguns and rifles at us. And I just remember how amazed I was that there was so many people there so fast. Leanne, there was cops pointing guns at me, and my little sister says, "No, no, that's my sister." And I don't think they'd received information that there was even hostages in the car. Trish, I reached back for my sister's hand and grabbed her hand and said, "Duck." Leanne, we both ducked, and we were praying and just squeezing each other's hand. We've always had a connection, even as little children, a special connection. When we can feel each other, she's always been a great comfort to me. Joel Offord, lead investigator. The suspects were taken from the vehicle and then were secured by the officers who'd arrived at the scene. These guys are obviously cowards. As long as they were in total control of the situation by use of fear and force, then they continued to function. When that control went away, it stopped and they surrendered to authorities. Linnae. The men were down on their knees with their arms behind their neck. And the cops were, yelling at them to get down, and surrender. I started to yell at the cops to kill them. I said, "Kill them. They just killed my mom, my dad, and my grams. Kill them. Shoot them now. Kill them." Trish, I remember feeling I remember a feeling of not necessarily being safe, but I've survived. We were no longer in the custody of those two evil men. Randy, the helicopter showed up pretty quick, actually, and they got Rolf out of the back of my Blazer and got him into care, and he was in pretty bad shape, critical condition. And when it lifted off, I'm just praying that he makes it. Trish, I can't imagine what had to have been going through Dad's head after he'd been shot and then shot again. And he's laying there, playing dead, trying to breathe as shallow as possible. I later learned that Dad had actually been doused with gasoline and he caught on fire himself. And he had to run into the shower and tear off his snowsuit while on fire. Having the strength to get on that snowmobile and race down that mountain to save my sister and I. How much blood he lost, he couldn't see, getting down the mountain in freezing temperatures. My whole life of my dad was my hero, and that just put an exclamation point on that. Linnae, my dad was the most amazing hero that I've ever known. Beautiful, kind, blue eyes. He was extremely kind and generous in every way. Joe Offord, the number one concern in this particular case is rescuing anybody who might need assistance. Secondly, is to preserve the evidence at the crime scene. One of the most significant pieces of evidence was a video camera. Inside the video camera was a videotape. We had no idea what might be recorded on that. So at a number of junctures in that film, I was saying, "Oh my God, oh my God." Suspects caught on tape. Brad Wild, patrol deputy. Hundreds of crime scenes later, it still ranks right up there. It's still very vivid to me. Probably when I got about 10 feet from the door, I picked up a faint smell. It was kind of like burnt hair and maybe burnt fabric, like clothes burning. As I entered the garage, there was maybe a 12 to 18-inch puddle of blood that was fresh. As I started up the stairwell, I could see holes in the walls, bullet holes coming from one wall across the stairwell into the other wall. There was blood smear on the wall. It looked like a bloody hand had wiped down the wall. It almost looked like a mini war zone. There was two bodies. I checked for a pulse, but I knew in my mind they were deceased. I actually walked into the smoke before I really realized that the top floor of that cabin was on fire. Then our mindset went to protecting the victim's property because we thought the cabin was going to burn down. On top of the coffee table, there was a VCR camera and some tapes. Lene. There was a double funeral for my mother and grandmother. My grandmother's name's Beth Tidwell Potts. My mother's name is Kay Tidwell Teedy. I remember just so many people and family that came to love us and help us feel their love and support. Trish, my Aunt Claudia, was my mom's older sister, and when mom passed, Aunt Claudia stepped in, letting us know that she was there, and it gave us all a sense of that we weren't alone. Claudia. I wanted to be there as much as I possibly could because they needed support. This was a horribly traumatizing thing for them, and we were what they had left. Trish. Grams had a lot of energy. She was full of life. Lene. She was a very fun and vivacious, energetic, happy grandma. She would give me permanence in my hair and make it curly. Awful. I remember mom called the aspen trees quakies. She loved the noise that the quaking aspen made in the wind. That was one of her fondest memories, and it is mine as well. Claudia. My sister was one of the most devoted mothers that I have ever known. She would give up anything for her children. She was strong willed, and they were strong willed. And that relationship is not without conflict, but they always worked it out. Trish. The morning of the crime, I remember turning and walking over to give my mother a hug, and she and I had got in a little argument earlier that morning over something silly. She and I both looked at each other. I mean, at 16 years old, just turned. Wasn't gonna give her a hug, and I turned and walked the other way. And that's the last time I saw my mom alive. Joe offered. You tell me what's your justification for taking these lives and doing this to these people that you don't even know? When I watched the videotape that had been taken from the crime scene, I expected to see pictures of family talking, playing games, doing what family folks do. But as it turns out, there were the two suspects. They were opening the family's Christmas presents. Lene, I remember thinking of the pure malice and hate that these men must have in their hearts. What heartless jerks. Why would you do this to our family? Joe. The two men were in their early to mid 20s. Both spent time at the Utah State Penitentiary. Vaughn Taylor had been previously convicted of an aggravated burglary. What I gather is he was a normal kid, a very normal and decent family, but that at some point he got into some conflict with the law. I'm not aware of a violent history on Mr. Edward Daly. He'd been convicted of an arson. They'd been released from the penitentiary to a halfway house facility. Apparently, they were given the ability to go out and look for employment. At that point, they just absconded. Trish. I later learned that these men had hitchhiked their way up there and chose that area because of one of the men had family that had a cabin in that area. They had robbed several cabins and eventually came to our cabin because they knew that we were there. They wanted to find a vehicle and get out of the country. They waited for us all night long to return. Joe, this might appear to be a slam dunk case to some folks. From an investigator's point of view, it was very complicated and very complex. Sure, it's not a whodunit. There's no question with who committed the crimes. But being able to determine what criminal act each suspect committed, that was a challenge. Two killers, two outcomes, justice served. Lene, Vaughn Taylor, and Ed Delly very much each took their own separate part in murdering my mom and Grams. I do not feel one man, at any way, shape, or form, was more responsible. Thomas Brunker, Assistant Attorney General. They were charged with the murders, the aggravated kidnapping, the arsons, the high-speed chase. I don't remember the exact number, but in addition to the murders, there were something like 8 to 10 felonies and some misdemeanors. Trish, I wanted them both to be sentenced to the death penalty. I want both of them to know that they were going to die. Thomas, approximately 5 months after these crimes, Vaughn Taylor pleaded guilty to 2 counts of capital murder, and the state dropped all of the other charges against him in exchange for that plea. Lene, I believe Taylor pled guilty to his crime because there was so much cold evidence against him that was all that he could plead was guilty. Taylor was an evil man. He had no remorse, no regard for life whatsoever. You could see it in his eyes. You could see it in his countenance. From the moment we saw him to the last time we saw him in court, he had just had this air about him of anger and zero remorse. Thomas. Taylor opted to go to sentencing in front of a jury instead of in front of a judge. The jury sentenced him to a death sentence for both murders, so he has 2 death sentences. Lene, I felt relieved that Taylor would be put to death for his crime. Justice had been served. Joe, a short period of time after that, a couple of weeks, I believe, then Mr. Delly went to trial. We were as prepared, if not maybe even a little bit more prepared, to go into the Delly trial as we were with the Vaughn Taylor trial. Leanne, I felt a great burden. I felt like they practically wanted me to be able to see the bullets coming out of the guns, that they expected me to point the exact gun in the direction of every bullet and where it hit at any given moment. I actually just had a whole epiphany of new thoughts come to that I don't think that was helpful for a victim to have to put a weapon that they watched their family murdered with, to even have to touch it. What is the point? The weapons were already on the table. Why would I have to touch it? Trish, those trials are somewhat of a blur to me. I was 16 years old and I wanted to go back and live that life I loved and not having to keep reliving a nightmare. Delly's lawyer argued that he didn't do any of the shooting. These men were guilty. They committed a crime, they needed to be punished, and we needed to move on. Joe, Leanne and Trish Teedy were excellent witnesses. They were very sure about the things they had seen and very articulate, able to relate these very, very sensational things and in an unemotional way. Extremely valuable witnesses. But we had another survivor of the case. Mr. Teedy survived. the assault, and the attack. Incredible guy. Trish, I remember watching the look on Deli's face as he came in seeing my father, and it was very apparent to me that he did not know my father had survived. And the look on his face was just priceless, like he had been defeated. My dad survived. We won. Joe, he's lucky that they used the wrong gun. What they shot him. They used bird shot. Very ineffective. They didn't know that. I think his odds of having made it and survived an incident like that are probably 1 in 1,000. He was kind of an ace in the hole, and he brought his prosecution together in an outstanding way. I expected Edward Deli to be convicted of first-degree murder. The case had been thoroughly investigated, and the prosecutor's office had done an excellent job. Randy, I heard the verdict came out second-degree murder with life imprisonment, and I never really understood that. I was I don't know, resentful, and I don't know how to put this inside. Something's wrong. How can he be sentenced to death? Thomas, Delia was not convicted of first-degree murder. He was convicted of second-degree murder, and a death sentence was no longer an option once that conviction came in. Lene, Edward Deli received second-degree murder instead of first-degree due to one jury member deciding to hold out. I felt like the courts did an injustice to our family. I felt like that he deserved to be on death row as well, just like Taylor. Deli murdered. Taylor murdered. Randy. This was such a horrific experience for everybody here that I think we all didn't know what to say or buried it inside to where we didn't talk about this a lot. Trish, I went through periods of anger and frustration and not understanding why. And for years and years that follow, I cried in silence. I spent a good 10 years hiding that pain and suppressing that pain. Leanne, I went through trying to find happiness in areas where happiness doesn't exist. I went through fear of putting my heart out there, fear of loving someone or letting someone love me, that they would abandon me. I believe it was 2001 I received a letter from Deli. I thought about it for many, many years and would go to write him a letter, and it just never felt right. Forgiveness and healing. Lene, it took me over 9 years to respond to Deli's letter. I held on to the letter and I reread it probably 20, 30 times. I basically wanted to get a feel if he was truly sorry. I was very careful and guarded with my feelings. Deli has shared with me that he has grown into a man, not the same evil boy that committed the crime. I believe that I gained my freedom back for myself by choosing to forgive Deli. For me, forgiving does not mean forgetting. I do not believe Edward Deli has a place outside of prison, but when I came to the place of forgiveness, I felt a tremendous burden, a relief off my shoulders. I felt free. Nathan Coates, Lene's husband. Lene is flawed perfection. She is my best friend. She's everything to me. There is something in her eyes that is just, it's like pure. And she's as flawed as the rest of us, but she has this innocence that still is there, that I just love. Lene, Nathan changed my life by opening his heart and sharing his true self and giving me the freedom to do the same. I have 4 kids and 5 beautiful stepkids. And I just feel like it's a beautiful start of a new beginning. For me to be a survivor has become a beautiful gift. I believe that I can share it with others. After the cabin had burned, we went and rebuilt it and made it even better than it was before. I can remember my dad. He would say this to me quite often. He would say, "Lene, I know lightning strikes," he says, "but lightning never strikes twice in the same location." And I would find great peace in that. Sometimes, if I ever would have fear, I would just hear my dad say, "Lene, you're going to be safe." Trish, it's fabulous. We love it there. We actually go up there and enjoy family and friends, and we play and we relax. We bond. They're not going to take away from us the things that we love and we enjoy in our life. They took our mom, they took our grams, but that's where it ends. Lene, the cabin's magical. The cabin, it is healing. Trish, when my father was diagnosed with cancer, our whole family came together. And that last 6 to 8 weeks of his life were so absolutely incredible. Nathan, he pulled me aside, spent about an hour and a half with me, just being him. Probably gave me one of the greatest compliments I ever had in my life. But I'm still just a touch uneasy about it. That he knew Lene would be okay and that he could go because he knew I would take care of her. Trish, when my father passed, it was very peaceful. I had the privilege of being right by his side as he took his last breaths, and his spirit has never left me. Anytime I need my dad, he's there. He comes in some of the most unique and special times. I very much still feel that my father is there. I have two beautiful little girls, and when I look into their eyes, I see both my mother and my father, and everything that's loving and pure. I have an awesome life. I love my life now, and I wouldn't say that the incident in 1990 defines me, but I would say it's helped make me who I am today. Claudia, I think my sister would be absolutely delighted if she looked down and to see the healing that Lene and Trish have gone through and what they've done with their lives. Lene, I feel very much so that this experience has changed me as a person. I choose that it's a part of who I am. It's my life story. Trish, what we experienced together that created a bond that obviously couldn't have with anyone else, and I'm glad that we were there together. I couldn't ask for more. Part 2, 3 gruesome Christmas family murders you probably haven't heard about. Source, aetv.com. For some, the holidays are not the most wonderful time of the year. We look at several famous Christmastime murders and the psychology behind the killers to find out why such a merry time of year for some can bring out deadly rage in others. Twinkling lights, presents wrapped up with bows, spending time with family, and murder. The Covina Massacre. Covina, a Los Angeles suburb, was a grisly scene off Christmas Eve 2008. The killer, Bruce Jeffrey Pardo, showed up at a holiday party wearing a festive Santa Claus costume. The problem was, he wasn't invited, and he was out for blood. Pardo opened fire on his ex-wife, Sylvia Ortega Pardo, and approximately 25 of her guests, including an 8-year-old girl who answered the door. Before unwrapping the gift, he had brought a homemade flamethrower. Because the winter holidays have a strong promotion of being family holidays, murder during these times is often associated with the killer having recently lost a loved one, having anger towards a rejecting former lover or spouse, or being resentful of a family that appears to have it all, explains Dr. Renee Carr, a clinical psychologist. Pardo's divorce had just been finalized the week before, and police speculated this was the trigger that led to his massacre of 9 people, including Sylvia and her parents. Though Pardo carried a plane ticket that pointed to a getaway plan, he took his own life shortly after the attack, but not before starting a fire that consumed the house. The blaze, ignited by racing fuel and fed by the festive light in 2 fireplaces, took 80 firefighters nearly 2 hours to extinguish. Many of the victims had to be identified through dental records. Carr says often the psychopathology behind holiday rage and murder is a lack of empathy for the lives of other humans or living beings. This is most likely born from a childhood of the murderer. If they are severely neglected or abused psychologically, emotionally, and or sexually, says Carr, as an adult, the person will unconsciously transfer these feelings and thoughts into rage that ultimately can lead to aggression and possibly murder. The Dallas Christmas killings. Another killer Santa, Aziz Yazdanpana, who don- who donned the festive red and white outfit in anticipation of his rampage on December 25th, 2011, entered his estranged wife's Dallas, Texas home and began shooting the family. They had just finished unwrapping their presents. All in all, he murdered 6 people, including his wife and 2 children, before killing himself. The victims and 2 handguns were discovered in the kitchen and living room, with presents and wrapping paper littering the floor. Yazdan Panah had been dealing with financial and marital issues, which detectives believe contributed to his mindset before the murder suicide. Like the Covina case, it's likely the suicide was a last minute decision when the killer found himself overwhelmed. The crime scene showed attempts by Yazdanapa to frame his brother in law by placing one of the guns in his hand. According to Carr, people who commit violent acts during the holidays are often consumed by feelings of rejection, usually by a love interest or a former lover, or even just someone they've been flirtatious with. Typically, they targeted their victim specifically, and their violence is a direct expression of their frustration, anger, hate, or rage toward that person, says Carr. These attackers are often fixated on the fantasy of holidays being synonymous with love, family, and fun. They believe their intended victim to be the reason they are suffering and deprived of an ideal holiday. The Lawson family murders. On Christmas Day in 1929, tobacco farmer Charlie Lawson killed his wife and all but one of his 7 children at his Germantown, North Carolina home. Just days after getting the family together for an expensive family portrait, and shortly after he and his eldest son, Arthur, went hunting, Lawson hid by the barn and ambushed 2 of his daughters, shooting and then bludgeoning them. Walking back toward the house, he killed his wife on the porch and then hunted down his oldest daughter and two youngest sons, who were hiding inside. Then he went into the woods where he killed himself. The sole survivor of the massacre was Arthur, 16, who had gone into town for some extra ammunition after their morning hunt. Part 3. The most chilling true crime cases happened around Christmas. Source: creepybonfire.com. The Unsolved Mystery of JonBenet Ramsey, a Christmas Tragedy. The chilling case of JonBenet Ramsey, a 6-year-old beauty queen, remains shrouded in mystery and horror. On the fateful night of December 25th, 1996, in Boulder, Colorado, a family's world turned upside down. JonBenet vanished from her home, sparking a frantic search. The discovery: a ransom note demanding $118,000. But this was no ordinary kidnapping. The twist in the tale came when JonBenet's father, John Ramsey, stumbled upon her lifeless body in their basement the next morning. The autopsy revealed a grim story. JonBenet had suffered a skull fracture and was strangled. The Boulder police initially turned to her parents, John and Patsy Ramsey, with suspicion. The theory: they killed their daughter and concocted the ransom note as a cover-up. However, this angle didn't pan out due to insufficient evidence, and the Ramseys were cleared. Attention then turned to a more sinister possibility: an intruder who, in a botched kidnapping attempt, ended JonBenet's life and fled, leaving a trail of unanswered questions. Despite extensive investigations, this angle also hit a dead end. The case, riddled with controversies and media frenzy, remains unsolved. Over the years, various theories and suspects emerged, but none led to a conclusive answer. In a twist, DNA evidence in 2003 pointed to an unknown male, excluding the family, leading to a formal apology to the Ramseys in 2008. Yet this DNA evidence, while significant, has not cracked the case open. When it comes to crime cases happened around holidays, the name JonBenet echoes on our minds. The tragic Christmas Eve, the unsolved case of Johnny Belvedere. On December 23rd or early December 24th, 2013, Johnny Belvedere was waiting in his car in a Macy's parking lot, chatting on the phone with his cousin. He was there to pick up his fiancée, Ilona Flint, who was finishing her shift at the store, bustling with last-minute holiday shoppers. This ordinary act of love and routine was about to turn into a horrifying tragedy. Without warning, a man approached Gianni's car. This man was Carlo Mercado. In a shocking and senseless act, Mercado shot and killed Johnny, then took his car. Mercado's actions didn't stop there. He drove the stolen car to his house, even stopping to fill it with gas, before returning to Macy's for his broken-down motorcycle. At Macy's, a grim discovery awaited Ilona Flint and Johnny's brother, Sal. They were searching for Johnny, hoping for any sign of him. They saw his car, but their relief turned to horror when they realized it wasn't Johnny at the wheel. In a cruel twist of fate, Mercado killed them both. Johnny Belvedere, 24, was considered a missing person until his body was found in Riverside weeks later on January 17, 2014, in the trunk of his green Toyota Camry. The police eventually arrested Mercado, but the motive behind these brutal killings remained a mystery. Mercado, who had never met his victims, did not explain. A theory surfaced about a possible connection to a road rage incident, but it remained unconfirmed and Mercado remained silent. The authorities ultimately labeled this horrifying series of events as a random act of violence, a label that does little to ease the pain and loss felt by those who knew and loved Johnny, Ilona, and Sal. This tragic story is a stark reminder of the fragility of life and the incomprehensible nature of random violence, leaving a community and families forever scarred by the events of one Christmas Eve. Part 4. The 2016 Berlin Market Massacre. Source: crimescenecleanup.com. On December 19th, a truck driven by Lucas Urban was commandeered by Anis Amri, who killed Urban and deliberately drove the truck into a festive Christmas market. 12 souls perished, and at least 56 people were injured. The Islamic State of Iraq and the Levant claimed responsibility for the act and released a video of Amri pledging his loyalty to the group's leader. Amri was killed in a shootout with law enforcement a few days later when he was discovered hiding in Milan, Italy. Unfortunately, the victims' families will never get to face him or mete out any lawful justice, but at least he cannot strike again. You might have heard about the Christmas Market Massacre because one of the first responders died in 2021. Many similar stories remain fresh in the public's conscience. No one wants to imagine a tragedy during the holiday season, but the grim reality is this: the holidays are not a time to completely lose track of your personal safety. Thank you for listening to Human Monsters, and Merry Christmas.